Have you seen the movie The Sound of Freedom? If you haven't seen it or even heard of it, it's a true story of a guy named Tim Ballard who rescues a bunch of kidnapped kids who were being used for sex trafficking. And if you haven't seen it, when you do, it's going to get you right in the feels. Now, I was already aware of a lot of this stuff because my girlfriend happens to be a retired captain from the U.S. Army. And she spends a good portion of her retired time to some nonprofits who do exactly what these guys do in the movie. They search for lost and missing kids, take them from the bad guys, and try to get them back to their parents. And I'm really proud of her for it. She spends hours on the internet chasing down leads. She handles the intel side of things. She's not the one with running around with guns blazing, but she does her part to get information to the guys in the field, boots on the ground, if you will, and helps them locate these poor kids so they can get them home to their families. So I wanted to do my part, and she's asked me to make some plaques that would be used as awards and thank yous to hand out to individuals and other agencies that assist them in this endeavor. My first thought was to make some inlays with the organization's insignia on it. But the problem is their colors. Well, there's no wood out there that I could get to even get close to the colors, which is two basic colors, orange and black. So I decided that I would try my hand at epoxy. Now, what you're about to see here is my first attempt at anything using epoxy. I have never used epoxy before, and it's going to show in this video. But hopefully you'll learn something, or at least learn what not to do when handling epoxy. I'm going to make these out of maple, as you can see, and this is going to be the first pocket that I'm going to pour the epoxy into. Not knowing exactly what I would need to do this, I ended up buying a kit off of Amazon that had everything I needed to pour epoxy. And it turned out to be pretty nice. I'll put a link to it down in the description. But it come with everything that you would need: little stirrers, paddles, cups, mixing cups, gloves, butter knives, I guess if you want to make toast, and of course the resin and the hardener. And I bought black and orange mica powder for the coloring. I cut the pockets at about 1/8 of an inch deep, and then I used this shellac to seal the edges. It's what I saw on YouTube. You need to seal the wood so the epoxy doesn't bleed. For the record, I did video myself mixing all this epoxy together, and it ended up adding about 5 minutes to the video, and it was boring as hell, and so I just deleted it out. It's pretty straightforward. 1 part epoxy, 1 part resin. Mix the mica to your desired color, and you're done. And plus, there's about 1,000 videos on YouTube showing this stuff that does a way better job than I do. So I just left that part out. I let the epoxy dry for about 24 hours, and then I did a light surfacing pass over the top just to get the surface of the wood and the epoxy even with each other. I cut the pocket for the inlay exactly as I would have done if I were doing wood. I use a 1/8 inch bit to do the clearing, and I use a 5-degree engraving bit to do the finishing cuts, and it turned out really, really nice. Epoxy is much easier to cut than wood, and I got some really nice, sharp, clean edges out of these. I learned a hard lesson in this project that epoxy doesn't bond to wood as well as I thought it would. As you can see here, when I was blowing the dust off, the center part of the pen, the D blew out. But no biggie, I can fix that later. Now I discovered that at least in maple, I really didn't need to use this shellac to seal the wood because the bleed over wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, especially since I've been surfacing the top. I took a few thousandths off the top, and whatever bleed over there was, or bleed into the grain it took it right out. So you can tell the orange was the background, and then I used the black for the letters and the other images. And when that dried, I come back and I cut out the little missing parts for the P and the R there and mixed a small amount of orange and just dropped it in there. And you have to let that dry. I let it dry 24 hours like the other just to be safe. And then I come back and I surface that off as well, and problem solved. Now, if you'll notice there, I had a nice black stripe down the center because apparently, despite my efforts of letting the wood acclimate, it cupped overnight while the epoxy was drying. So I had to come back and I turned the board over. I surfaced the bottom side to get the cup out of the bottom side, turned it back over, surfaced the top again to get the cup out. And luckily, like I mentioned earlier, I cut it a little deeper than I needed, so this allowed me a little margin for error. I learned from watching other YouTube videos that the sanding is a very important part to get a nice finish on the epoxy. So I started with 80 grit to get the tool marks out, and then I worked my way up all the way to 1,000 grit. And once you get to 1,000 grit, it's almost a glass-like finish, and you really don't have to do much more if you don't want to. All I did was just take it to 1,000 and then just finish it with some lacquer, and it turned out really nice. I also sanded the back side of the board. I didn't take it up to 1,000 grit, but I took it up to about 320. I figured it's easier to sand one big board than it was a bunch of individual plaques, and I was right. It turned out pretty simple. As you're watching me clamp this board down to my bed, what you're going to see me not do is tap those things in and get them nice and tight. And this come back and bite me in just a second. Now, up until this point in the project, because I was experiencing all kinds of warm and fuzzy feelings because so far this thing had gone on without a hitch, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. But then my luck ran out. When I did the second set of plaques, I made sure that I had everything clamped down properly, and as added security, I used a down cut bit to do the profile, and not only did that save me from a lifting, but it also made a really nice clean cut on the edge. So I think I'm going to start using down cut bits a lot more often now. I'm pretty sure I mentioned in my last video how much I despise sanding. So I bought this sander right here, oscillating sander, and it's a godsend. It really made short work of sanding the side of this thing. I highly recommend one if you don't already have one. I decided to seal this with lacquer. I had seen somebody else do it, and it seemed like a really easy, quick, and simple way of getting this sealed properly, and it actually turned out pretty nice. So I would like to try some later on down the road and seal them with actual epoxy. But right now, because I have so many to do, I felt that the lacquer would be something pretty quick and easy to get it sealed nice. So as you can see here, I put one coat on, let it dry, and then come back and sanded it with 1,000 grit, and then put another coat on it, and it turned out really nice. So there you have it. My attempt at epoxy. I wanted to make something that mattered for these guys. Like I said, this is a very important organization, and I hope that you see the movie Sound of Freedom, and I hope that you check out these organizations. They really do matter, and they do good things. I'm going to put links down to them in the description, so please check them out. And if you don't donate to them to help them out, then just by watching my channel, you're making a donation, because I've pledged part of the proceeds from whatever I make off this thing to help these guys out. So thank you for your time for watching this. I appreciate it so much, and I'll see you next time. Y'all take care.